Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're looking at the worst of the worst. Being evil is one thing, but being evil with no remorse, rhyme, or reason, it's just too much for us. And in Final Fantasy, you have some truly anger-inducing characters to choose from. These are the 10 worst people in the Final Fantasy series. Let's go.
Before we continue, we publish content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of our latest videos.
Chaos Final Fantasy. Chaos in Final Fantasy is the worst in the best possible way. He isn't just a villain, he's the foundation of the entire series' obsession with fate and conflict. What makes Chaos so effective is that he is Garland, a fallen knight consumed by bitterness, who quite literally bends time itself to sustain his existence. That twist doesn't just make him powerful, it makes him kind of tragic. He's trapped in a self-perpetuating loop of hatred, constantly creating the very warriors of light destined to defeat him over and over and over again. That's not just evil, that's existentially horrifying. He doesn't need grand speeches or flashy motivation. For him, conflict is eternal, which is convenient because it's an NES game. We don't really have the space for a Sephiroth monologue. Ultimecia Final Fantasy VIII. Ultimecia stands out as one of the most detestable antagonists in Final Fantasy VIII and the series as a whole because of how unapologetically manipulative she is. Within the plot of the game, this makes her awful. Ignoring her ultimate goal of global destruction, the thing that really sucks about her is that rather than confronting her enemies directly, Ultimecia repeatedly possesses others, using them as tools to carry out her will. This reliance on inhabiting different bodies makes her feel less like a bold conqueror and more like a coward. Her actions disrupt lives and relationships, which on a smaller scale feels almost more evil than world domination. She's not dislikable, she's unlikable. Sephiroth, Final Fantasy VII. The argument I hear a lot, is that Sephiroth's evil change is justified, and I'm here to say a huge I beg to differ. Sephiroth's downfall in Final Fantasy VII is honestly one of the biggest overreactions in gaming history. He starts off as this respected war hero, someone everyone looks up to, and the second, and I mean the second he finds out he's basically a lab experiment, he completely loses it. Instead of handling it like a respected and stoic war hero would, he decides the best response is to burn an entire town, kill a bunch of innocent people, and traumatize everyone who survives. Not exactly a calm and reasonable reaction. But it gets worse. Sephiroth goes from angry to full-on world-ending maniac, and then kills Aerith. Brother. Queen Brahne, Final Fantasy IX. Queen Brahne in Final Fantasy IX is one of those characters that's just straight up painful to watch, and not in a funny Michael Scott kind of way. She treats her own adopted daughter, Garnet, horribly, ignoring her, using her powers for destruction, and then outright turning on her without a second thought. Girls support girls, come on. Instead of protecting her kingdom, Brahne drags it into a pointless war driven by greed and ambition, wiping out entire cities and ruining everything her people once stood for. It's not even like she has some deep, understandable reason behind it either. Her motivations feel really shallow, which somehow makes it worse. Judges, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. Nothing kills the fun faster in Final Fantasy Tactics Advance than making a move, hearing that stupid judge whistle, and instantly realizing you've just messed up. The whole judge system Sounds cool on paper, adding rules to battles to mix things up, but in reality it just makes everything way more frustrating than it needs to be. One fight you're told you can't use items, the next you can't use magic, and sometimes you're not even allowed to attack. Like, what are you actually supposed to do at that point? Instead of making battles more strategic, it just feels like the game is getting in its own way. And it all just becomes kind of tedious when you can just pass days to rotate the laws. It's pointless. The judges will never be world-destroying supervillains, but they're the worst in that the judges kind of way. Cait Sith, Final Fantasy VII. This is going to be a tough pill for some players. From the moment Cait Sith shows up in Final Fantasy VII, most players immediately get a really bad feeling about him. He kind of just forces his way into the group out of nowhere, acting friendly, but never really giving you a reason to trust him. Even the way he talks and inserts himself into serious moments makes it feel like he's hiding something. Sure enough, it turns out he's exactly what players suspected, a spy working for Shinra tied directly to one of the higher-ups. He betrays the group by stealing the keystone, which leads to unlocking a dangerous temple tied to world-ending materia, blah 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 blah. It's a pretty big moment, but not in a good way. What makes it worse is that when he later tries to redeem himself, it just doesn't land. By that point, most players have already written him off. Among fans of Final Fantasy VII, Cait Sith is basically shorthand for, yeah, this guy's gonna betray you. Annabella Rossfield, Final Fantasy XVI.
You sold your country for a child.
Why did he need another? You had Joshua.
I had nothing. You were always your father's son, so very strong and bold and daring, and yet you failed to awaken. Would that Joshua had been granted 1/10 of your strength. Oh!
Annabella Rossfield in Final Fantasy XVI is awful right from the start, and somehow she only gets worse the longer the story goes on. Early on, she's already shown to be a cold and bitter mother, treating her own son like a disappointment. Instead of supporting him, she basically writes him off, which immediately makes a terrible first impression. But that's just the beginning. As the story unfolds, Annabella goes from being a bad parent to a full-blown traitor, turning on her own family for more power. She's selfish, cruel, and completely obsessed with status, never satisfied no matter how much influence she already has. And I hate to harp on it, but it's how casually she betrays people that makes her the worst. There's no hesitation, there's no regret. It's just whatever benefits her in that exact moment.
Get away from me! This is all just a dream, just a bad dream! You will not take me, Shadow! You will not take me!
Seymour Guado, Final Fantasy X.
Isn't that Maester Seymour?
Seymour in Final Fantasy X is one of those characters that players just love to hate. Oh, sorry, I messed that up. Seymour in Final Fantasy X is one of those characters that players hate. Just regular hate. From the moment he shows up, everything about him feels off. His weird haircut, his weird voice, his weird way he carries himself and his weird goddamn hands. He gives off major, this guy is the villain energy, but still acts like he's being subtle about it, which somehow makes it feel worse. And then there's his obsession with Yuna, going as far as forcing her into marriage. And herein lies the problem. What makes Seymour especially frustrating is how obvious he is. Characters like Tidus and Auron clearly don't trust him, yet everyone else seems way too willing to go along with things, even when it's clearly heading in a bad direction. It's everyone else that makes him even more unlikable, which would usually feel unfair that everyone else affects him. But then I looked at his hands again, and screw that guy.
All the pain of life is gently swept away. Ah, yes.
Kefka, Final Fantasy VI. We have to throw in a couple villains that aren't just the worst because their vibe is weird. We gotta chuck in some straight up evil. Kefka Palazzo in Final Fantasy VI might act like a clown, but there's nothing funny about him once you actually see what he does. At first, his childish behavior and over-the-top personality can come across like a sidekick, Pretty quickly, it becomes clear that he's not messing around. He's genuinely one of the most dangerous villains in the entire series. He's not a jester, he's the Joker. Unlike other villains who try to justify their actions, Kefka doesn't really care about reasons. He's cruel, unpredictable, and completely committed to causing as much damage as possible. That mix of power and madness is exactly why players remember him and why he's still considered one of the most feared villains in Final Fantasy VI. Hojo, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Easy now. That is a valuable specimen. It must be handled with the utmost care.
Sephiroth might be the main villain in Final Fantasy VII, and Jenova is this weird alien threat, but Hojo hits differently, and in the worst way. The reason people hate Hojo so much is because he feels real. He's not some distant godlike figure or mysterious creature, he's just a human scientist who genuinely does not care about anyone but himself. That alone already makes him more uncomfortable than most villains in the game. Hojo is behind some of the most messed up experiments in the entire story, and he treats people like they're nothing more than test subjects, and sometimes his test subjects. If you recruit Vincent, it gets even worse, because you see just how far Hojo is willing to go. Getting a face and voice in the remakes just made everything so much worse. Seeing what he did to Red 13 is one thing, but hearing it, ugh, no thanks.
Hold still, my pet.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of our latest videos.